Yeah, see, it just doesn't look that, like, I mean, it looks cool, but it just doesn't fit, right? Anyways, that's that. This fits way better. I should probably just buy this because it's cool. Anyways, so I'll talk about my my build for Xenobia. It's on Mistforge. People have criticized it a lot. So like Scougie is like number 7 on the leaderboards. Obviously, he's number 7 for a reason. He mains Xenobia, and so he plays a different build, which I have yet to try, but I trust that it works, obviously, because it's gotten him to where it is. And I showed him my build, and he was like, "Yeah, you're asking for death," which is in part true, but I also disagree with him on that point. In that, it took me a long time to really kind of focus on my positioning, because this build is heavily focused on you have to have your positioning needs to be on point at all times, which is tough because it's also kind of a bit of a more aggressive build. So your job is basically, and this is also not the best build to pursue. It's always situational, right? So you need to go, you need to adapt to what the other team is, has, and what their, what they might spec, and also how to support your team, right? So like you might start specking a certain way and realize, shit, we're getting rocked. So that's a point to where you need to evaluate and know which, way you might be able to deviate from the normal sort of build. So I'll talk a little bit about that once I get there. Actually, no, I'll probably get there pretty soon. Anyways, the point of this build is to inflict as many debuffs on as many people as possible, and you're effectively weakening them, you're making them bleed, you're breaking their armor, and you're opening a window, you're slowing them, applying weakness, you're opening a window for your teammate to literally just melt them. So that said, it's like you need to know where you need to be. You need to be aware of, like, if there's an enemy trip running around or a woo, like if you get pulled, you're dead. If you haven't seen the trip in a while, she's probably behind you, and that's a problem, especially if you've just tossed down your E, your Q, you have no escape. So that's where Scougie is right, in that it's asking for death, but you also, if you know how to calculate for that, right? Like if you know how to calculate for that, then that's something that you can kind of adapt for. So here's how the build starts out. I always go for, immediately, I go for weakness. People criticize this heavily. They're like, oh my God, it's single target. Early on, it's actually quite effective. It also builds a path for later on that's really helpful. You're going to get level 2 literally immediately. So I go bounce to two additional targets. What this does is it cracks armor on 3 people, basically, if you place it right. So you now have 60% of their team that is cracked armor, and you can weakness on 1 person. You're dropping your slow. They now have a debuff. Third option, which is really quick also, I do projectile moves through enemies. A lot of people really like to go for launching up, but again, remember the point of this build is to inflict as many debuffs on as many people as possible, right? So this will move through enemies, and this paves the path for tier 2 later on, which if they have cracked armor, it inflicts broken armor. So, oh my gosh, what a convenience. Our right mouse button inflicts cracked armor. So you're inflicting cracked armor on 3 out of 5 people of the team, and the cooldown on your right mouse button is not that bad. So fourth, I head over to give bleeding. This is just another debuff because eventually, like, you're already inflicting debuffs. So check it out. So like you start doing damage on this guy, we toss this down, do this, he's bleeding, launch him up. Right now, I don't do much damage or inflict much, debuffs, but see how quick that cooldown is? So I can easily, technically, if I plan it right, get the whole team under a debuff. So now watch what happens, right? The next level, so now we're at, I think, yeah, this would be level 5. The next level, you want to add additional debuff length. Then, after Q, then you're leveling up your Q, you get to your cracked armor. Like if they have cracked armor, you inflict broken armor. So now you basically literally have, people just melt. If I go over these little guys over here, they're just going to get fucking destroyed. I literally dropped something down. Look at that. It passed through. It bounced to both of them. This guy's bleeding. Now he's bleeding again. I mean, that cooldown is so quick. It's so fast. It's, you know. So that said, it's like, you know, look at the situation that I just put myself into, right? Like, you know, I have to be knowing that, you know, where I'm at, where the other team is, this and that, right? I know we need to initiate over here. I need to know the distance, the range on my, you know, my debuffs and this and that. So when you pay attention to that, you position yourself right, you know the other team's over here, you set yourself up for success. You can basically line this all up, right? So you saw me trying to line up both of those little Motigas because I knew that if I got both of them on my path, I was going to slow them. They were going to be bleeding. They had cracked armor, so with the wave, they were then going to have broken armor. And that right there inflicts so much, so many debuffs on the, you know, a lot of people. So, you know, if there is a big team fight, right, theoretically, I can have people slowed, I can have people bleeding, I can break the armor of 60% of their team, and that is enough to turn a fight 90% of the time if your team is initiating correctly and if your positioning is proper. So those are big ifs, I understand, but you learn very quickly like where to be, how to best support your team, and always thinking about an exit plan, right? Like that's the other part of it. So I'm not going to say that this is the best build because you know, it's probably not, but I've won a majority of my games with this. And once you start getting to the later levels, I mean, you can solo people and people really treat you as a threat. Like I've top fragged in games. I've gotten 30, I think my most assists I got was like 30 assists in a game. And I started getting focused, right? Like people dive me because even if I'm in the back and it's a risk to them because they know that I'm turning the fights. So that's another thing to be aware of. So people will debate. So one thing I was saying about situational sort of builds is I usually go this path because I like to do curse and then eventually cripple. This is another one you can do. Like if you need more damage, you can go the right path. So that's an example. But if they have any sort of healing whatsoever, like, you know, if they have a Vidasi, if they have a Sven, you know, like go poison. And actually, I would swap out. Normally, I keep these till like the end, right? Because it's like it's really not. I guess like, you know, you could probably swap this out a little earlier, but if they have healing, do this quick, like upgrade and reduce the healing because on top of your debuffs that you're applying, you're reducing their healing, and it's just really going to cripple their team because they've dedicated 20% of their team to provide some sort of healing role. Vidasi is all healing, so now you've effectively like really reduce their team effectiveness if you place your pools correctly and this and that. If it's a Sven, right, like it's not as good of heals, but then that just compounds like how much you like are impacting their team dynamic, right? Go poison if they have healing. It's like the best thing you can do. Do it early. I would even say maybe do it second or third. Maybe like do it in place of this bounce to 2 targets or in place of your Q at level 3. It'll happen fast and just do it quick. So once I get to level 6, I go the left path because once you start getting into later battles, right, like you will find that people are going to start to try and like you're going to find yourself in situations to where, you know, you are trying to play a little bit aggressive. And I've been in situations where I was getting chased by a Margrave and I drop my E, I put down my right mouse button, I throw my Q, and then I just focus and just channel for as long as I can, because if you see what this is doing, it becomes stronger as you focus on one enemy. So you get to a max of reducing their damage by 50%. You can solo, honestly, like if you really rotate your skills and like, you know, do positioning and hit your stuff, you know, and like continue the bleed and the broken armor and everything, you can solo basically any hero in the game. And I know some people might disagree with this, but I'm speaking from actual experience on this. Like I have soloed myself out of situations that I thought I would have not gotten out of. And this is a big part of that. On top of that, you also can play a support role and save. I've saved a lot of teammates from some pretty hairy situations because I place my E well. I dropped down my right mouse button until I was cracked and bled. Cracked their armor, started making them bleed. I threw out a Q, so now they have broken armor, and that sometimes doesn't hit, right? But if you see someone getting chased aggressively and you start channeling this, and like you can really provide that sort of support, not only can you try and get close and knock them up with your Q if you wait for the right time, but you're reducing the incoming damage on them, right? And you're also gaining some health back for yourself. So a lot of times, of course, they're going to swap over to you. That's to be expected. But again, if you're thinking about your positioning, you're planning an exit plan, a lot of times you can get out. There's not always going to be times when you can get out because, if it's a hairy situation, you're going to usually have to like put yourself in harm's way. But understanding which situations to do that in is a big part of this build too, right? So like there are some situations where you just can't, it doesn't make sense for you to dive because you're just going to be feeding kills. Anyway, so we're now at level 7. I usually like doing hitting this up, and then you can get more focus. And then the pools, like, again, I talked about this earlier, like, if they have healing, go fucking poison, otherwise I go this. And then you can see how fast this guy just, like, burns. And this is just me doing damage. So it's like, you imagine if you have, like, any sort of DPS doing anything for your team, like, it's just... And that's a big creature, right? So that would be like the equivalent of a Margrave. So let's go over to like these stupid little Motigas. Broken armor, weakness, bleeding. It's just like, and then the right mouse button, like cooldown is just nothing. It's so fucking easy. And if you do that too, like there's 3 over here, right? So like let's take a situation of like there's 3 little guys. I don't know if I can get them all actually. I mean, it's like their health just drops. It's like
ashes to ashes.
Yeah, it's a good build. I'm not saying it's the best, and like I can understand the criticism behind it, but it really like it's one that's underestimated. I would say like people. I mean, I'll go put it to practice, but it's one that people like. I think they've looked at it and they're like, it's not the best. There's weaknesses to it. I get it, but from experience, I've found that it is highly effective and can really contribute to a lot of, like, it can actually turn matches. But the biggest thing is you need to learn where to be, how to be, and, like, choose which situations you need to, like, put yourself in harm's way for, right?